Well, now we're live, so I don't see anybody
Oh,
join. Oh, hello, Georgie. So people are starting to join. So I don't know if we want to
hello, hello.
continue talking about my.
No, no, we do not. We absolutely do not. However, I suppose we can overarchingly classify this as even Substack now has trolls.
Yes, and
Fewer,
and
fewer than other platforms, but still there are some of them.
and unfortunately, some of us are related to some of them, which is what we were talking about.
Yeah, thankfully, I don't have that type of trial and tribulation in my life. But yeah, no, I mean there are people who vehemently disagree with evidence based positions, which all the time just really blows my mind. So yeah,
Wow. Anyway, we have people joining us. So we're joined today by Michael Zeitgeist, who's one of my favorite people that I've met on Substack or anywhere for that matter. And he writes a Substack called The Pulse. He's had a big presence on TikTok, even though I think you said TikTok has pretty much fallen by the wayside because of their censorship positions.
yeah,
Yeah.
been it's been an interesting run on TikTok to touch back. I started this while I was still teaching in Minnesota
Yeah.
at a small university, and you try to mask who you are because you don't necessarily know if you want your students and fellow faculty to see what you're up to. So I kind of sort of tippy-toed into this. And I did one video that essentially I picked up another creator's production and added my 2 cents to it. It was about Bernie Sanders, in fact. And that just blew up. And suddenly, this guy who's used to being on radio, I was on air for 11 years, suddenly he's like, oh, shoot, there's a camera now. I got to talk into this. And to this day, I'm not good at it. And yeah, this kind of took its own little momentum, and it was quite interesting as the United States then took a pretty hard turn to the right. Um, the language used and the propaganda displayed and disseminated really brought it home because that's the stuff I grew up with.
Well, let's talk about that for people who don't know you. Some people here do. You're from Austria originally
Yep,
and have lived in the United States since 1999.
correct.
Correct. So long time. But, all of my friends from Europe who got more German-based educations learned very differently from me, even what history was. So talk about how you were taught history as a German-speaking Austrian versus how other people are taught history. It's interesting to me to hear.
Yeah. So, I mean, particularly as an Austrian, inevitably you're starting on the back foot already. Considering our role in what I think shaped to be one of the darkest of human times. And I remember growing up, it's always been a topic, but it's never been a topic. It's always been a topic in history class. It's always been a topic in a variety of sociology perspective, but at home and within the realm of your acquaintances, it's usually not a topic.
Okay.
And I remember reading Anne Frank's diary. It turned into a school play. We were on various school trips. We talked with survivors who at that point already were in a variety of assisted living situations. And it doesn't rattle you right away to recognize how they're behaving in the course of the conversation that you have with them. That sets in later when you reach a certain level of maturity, where you recognize, oh, wait a minute, this person was actually just swallowing down their PTSD and
Mhm.
their memories and still trying to be in a frame of mind where they recognize that there's a student there. 9, 10, 12 years old.
Mhm.
And they did such an amazing job in telling us what it was like. And that was done, essentially, it built the foundation to understand when we went to various concentration camps,
Yeah.
what actually really took place there.
And you did that on school field trips.
Yes.
Yes, as part of, learning history.
Yeah.
In the southern US, we went to plantations, which were also concentration camps, but they weren't ever called that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, inevitably, we have an advantage here, if you want to call it an advantage, in that those sites are preserved. They are ready to be seen and understood as to we don't ever want to go back there again,
Mhm.
ever. And those camps didn't show up in 38 right away. Those camps came later on. In the beginning, there was language. In the beginning, there was propaganda. In the beginning, there was this type of, I will grip you and bring you closer through fear, through promises, through situational descriptions that may or may not be applicable to your life, but still relatable enough that you can buy into it. And notwithstanding that there was no evidence for most of what they said, it still worked. And I've seen the same things here, and now coming full circle to TikTok. When I started to speak about this, particularly about methods and mechanics of communications and propaganda, I saw that my following increased, but my engagement decreased.
Hmm.
And before I knew it, I've been stuck at 67,000 for, I think, almost 2 years now. They don't let me grow there. That I've had 300 plays, 400 plays. Maybe I should have done it without a shirt on. I don't know. Maybe that would have sold better. I don't know.
One of the things that we're learning everywhere, and I've learned over and over and over again in my various adventures on all these platforms, is when the black box algorithm decides you're not going to grow anymore, you're not going to grow anymore. And there's really nothing you can do about that. And Substack's having the same problem, as you and I have both talked about. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So,
X does, by the way, just the same. In 2015, I published Walter Langer's dossier that he wrote for the Office of Strategic Services. He was the chief psychologist back then. He wrote about the psychological profile of Adolf.
mhm.
And if you take the name out of the equation and you replace it with Donald, you're in the same threshold.
Yeah. So you lived and worked in greater Minneapolis, still work there. What is it like there? We can read a lot of various descriptions of what's happening. Nothing on the news or social media is really capturing the extent of what's happening. Everyone says that. So talk some about what it's like there for people.
Um, in full disclosure, I am not in Minneapolis right now. I'm in Italy.
It was up to you to disclose that.
Yeah.
I was not going to.
No. I mean, it's. I think the one thing that I've always done is I don't readily usually speak about myself. That's why I don't offer it up usually. But when it comes down to it, now I've always been transparent to the degree that this is where I'm at, because the writing's on the wall, has been on the wall, and even if I had considered to say I'm going to take a break and step out, even if it had been vacation or visiting my folks back in Vienna, I think there's a pretty high likelihood they wouldn't let me back in right now.
Mhm.
So, what's it like in Minneapolis? The best reference that I can give you is George Floyd. When George was murdered, also not far from my office, Minneapolis came together and stood up, and it turned into this global phenomenon. We don't have the global phenomenon right now to that degree, but we have the coming together of the Minnesotans. And when push comes to shove, it seems that Minnesota always finds a way to bridge its differences and basically find a way to object. And back then, I was actually on the way home. Then the state guard was on Grand Avenue. I filmed it, ended up on Austrian TV with it. But it was there was an unspoken, deeply rooted sense of camaraderie. And I think it's the same now. When I listen to my friends who are close to it, one of my staff members lives not far also from Green Elementary, where Alex was executed. There is a sense of heightened awareness, of objection, but also camaraderie.
Mhm.
And it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they are targeting particularly Minneapolis, because I don't believe that the fuse that had been lit back with George ever really fully was extinguished. I think it was always there. It was just the course of life, essentially, the American condition, just covered it up a little bit. But you bring about circumstances that are greater than the American conditions, such as your requirements to go to work and to pay your bills, the typical things where we sell time for money. Once you introduce a conduit that is greater than the circumstances, you're bringing back that fuse.
Mhm.
You're bringing back that camaraderie, and you're bringing back this objection to stand for what is right. And clearly they miscalculated, because Minneapolis and Minnesota, St. Paul, we stay on the up.
Mhm.
I hope that's sort of a lesson for all the other cities.
Yeah, and areas. I mean, there have been reports out of Maine as well, where Lewiston and Portland are having the same problems of cars being left running with nobody in them and broken windows, and the people are gone. And the same kinds of things have been happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the greater surrounding area for a while now. So this is a tactic that they're using
Yep.
wherever they can get away with using it.
Yep. What's interesting, though, is here in Europe, I see and sense a lot of bewilderment in a way that people are looking across the pond, so to speak. It's like, are they nuts over there? What are they doing? That there is this disbelief to some degree that this could even take place, because it's just so apocalyptical.
Yeah. I mean, Anne Applebaum wrote a good piece for The Atlantic about how the nation's basically committing suicide.
Oh yeah,
And having written about Project 2025 all of 2024, I understood the day after the election that the nation had voted to commit suicide. And we can argue about, well, the majority of the people didn't vote for that, but between the ones who voted for it and the ones who didn't vote at all, the majority of the people did vote for that.
yeah, no,
So,
100%, and
yeah,
therein lies the problem. Democracy requires participation.
yeah. So, and I, full disclosure, a lot of people know this, but I don't live in the United States any longer either. I left before the election in 2024. So, it is interesting and difficult to watch this happening from the outside and watch people's reaction to it. There are certainly friends of mine who say, what can I do to help Americans kill this movement? And we talk about boycotts and not going to the United States and encouraging people not to frequent United States companies or institutions that are in the places that we live, and identifying those for them. So, there are those people, but then there are those people that are just like, you're nothing special and we don't want to even talk about that. We don't care. Every other country has had its problems and now you're going to have yours, and, we don't care. So you run the gamut in your friend groups, and you probably found the same thing, where it's a
I have.
spectrum.
Yes, and to the effect of a general American strike. I wrote a piece about this in 2024. I revised it just a few weeks ago, and I think the fatal flaw in my 2024 perspective, if you will, was that I think broadly Americans still don't understand unity and collectivism. We're still
Rugged
working with this.
individualists.
Right, exactly. We're still working with this underground. I think it's slowly but surely shifting. See Minneapolis, for instance. But the problem is also that, again, the typical American condition doesn't necessarily perpetuate that we come together for long enough to actually really stop the country's machinery. We can't. 60% plus at this point, probably, live paycheck to paycheck.
Mhm,
You don't even have the resources to go out there and say, I'm going to be done for 2 weeks because you just can't bridge the gap.
mhm,
So that's where it's really difficult to consider that Americans have the collectivistic thought and intention to come together for long enough, and then also the opportunity to really affect change. And then the secondary question I think that comes through this is, well, what happens in the event of? Well, we're just going to add a zero to the nation's debt.
mhm.
So to outlast them is going to be incredibly difficult, which brings about the question of what other options do we have? Objection comes with sacrifice.
Mhm. And, the midterms are certainly an opportunity to vote them out if we get there. And, we certainly have to be working toward that kind of organization as well, but we can't take for granted that we'll even have those elections, unfortunately.
Yeah, midterms. I mean, for one, to cancel the midterms is just legally an impossibility. They will take place.
Mhm.
Are we going to show up?
Who knows?
Uh, maybe we've learned from the last time around that we actually should be at the ballot box. Now, you add this unbelievable machinery of voter suppression and intimidation to it, and the US Postal Service with its little trickery now that they're stamping when they stamp it and not when you drop it off. I
Mhm,
mean, there are ways around that, but most people don't know that.
mhm,
So, will we have midterms? Yes. Are they going to be free and fair? No.
mhm.
And even if we show up in such numbers that the outcome is just unmistakable, will the results be adhered to?
They're not following anything else right now.
Exactly.
They're certainly not following court orders, and we still don't have the Epstein files released. And so, what I've said to people is Stephen Miller understands if he ever loses power, he is going to probably be tried and executed for his crimes. There's a groundswell of people calling for that sort
Mhm.
of punishment now for this to Nuremberg them. So the price for losing power is a lot higher for them than it was the last time.
Yeah, and I think therein lies another sort of reinforcing circumstance for them in a sense that they have gone so far down the road of commitment that turning around now and coming back with a big oh mea culpa and we apologize, we recognize the error of our ways is not going to happen. I mean, how many states are now passing laws or at least have now laws proposed that anyone who is in ICE service once all this is over, is not going to have federal or state employment.
Yeah.
Well, so not only do you have the ideological commitment, but you're also going to have an economic commitment that's pushed upon them. Where is it going to end? I don't. That I think that's the question we're going to have because I don't see a positive way out of this. As much as I would like to be positivistic about this, I just don't know. How do you overcome someone who's so ruthless? And what we're also commonly forgetting is we're focusing on what I would call the regime, the enemy.
Mhm,
There are millions of people who want this.
mhm.
they want this, and it's hair raising, but yeah, they want this.
What do you think of soft secession tools?
So secession,
And soft secession is the only, ultimately, whatever comes out of this may be a new country or set of countries. I don't know. But soft secession is just we're going to do these things
yeah.
to harm the regime, the federal regime, without formally seceding from the Union. So, what do you think of those kinds of tools?
I mean, for one, I am missing a unified voice coming from the Democratic Governors Association.
Hmm.
The silence is deafening.
Hmm.
And where are we? Sure. I mean, right now Tim is front and center because of Minnesota. Gavin Newsom, as many flaws and faults as he has, is the only one who's head on essentially taking it to Trump. Maine has, at some point, I think she said, "Well, keep it up, and we're just going to withhold our federal taxes from you." There are blurbs here and there and lip service as far as Democratic voting pace is concerned, but I'm missing the unified voice of them coming together and presenting a unified front. We don't
Hmm.
have that. And from a secession standpoint, I mean, an actual secession, I think, is a political nightmare, and never mind the logistics nightmare, the border nightmares, untangling the financial systems. It'd be catastrophic. It's not just, oh, we are us now and you are you, and then the red states are going to pretty quickly figure out, wait a minute, without the blue states we're going to be in really harm's way economically, therefore we're going to have to go back and grab the blue states again. It's such a nightmare scenario that is bordering an impossibility. However, again, a unified voice coming out of the democratic governors, I think that's overdue.
Yeah. Or a unified Democratic voice, period, is very overdue, I think.
Soft secession is the way. I wonder how many will still want this when the violence is at their door. NSPM 7. A not really talked about little thing, if you will, that's coming into play. Most likely, I think it's signed off already. NSPM 7 essentially comes out to be where you can report someone and get a reward for it.
Right. Which will happen to me on day one.
Once
You
we put
know,
a reward scenario in there, all bets are off.
well, there's that feature of it, but also, Jennifer talked about how will they feel about it when violence is at their door.
Mhm.
That's one of the ways that I've said they could do martial law. You have people on the left who are going, they'll never be able to do martial law all over the country. But I've talked about sitting in a pew in a church in the South when I was in elementary school and hearing how I would someday have to take up arms and kill Americans
Mhm.
to worship Jesus. People have been conditioned to that kind of violence for decades in a lot of these Christian nationalist congregations. So, the thought of doing that, some of them will do it. All of them won't do it, but the really radicalized ones will do it. So between people who are willing to do that when they're given the go-ahead and people like we were talking about before we came live, I related to somebody who would report me for a bounty on day one. If I were there, they would probably do worse than that. So, we have people who desperately want to punish us for disagreeing with them. And those mechanisms are being put in place by the regime to do that.
That, and I'm playing back, so to speak, to a Twitter live that I accidentally stumbled into. I use Twitter here and there. If I'm not frustrated enough during the day, I go on Twitter, and that problem is solved pretty quickly.
5 minutes, you're frustrated.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't. No, no, it doesn't even take that long. Um, in any regard, for some reason, I happened upon this Twitter live, and the only reason I think why I got into it is because Matt Gaetz was in there and Mike Flynn, and I wanted to figure out what this is about because I would not have expected back then Matt Gaetz was still in political office to just show up on the Twitter live. Well, little did I expect there were 40,000 people in this Twitter live, and the host was either active duty or retired already, but armed services. And by my gauge, so were most of the members there. And I ended up recording a fair bit of this, and it gave me the sense that our armed forces are firmly divided.
Hmm.
Now, in which split, I don't know, but just to consider that they're firmly divided should give us pretty significant pause because right there is where we have the issues because who knows who's going to be on our side,
Hmm.
which goes to the entire idea of secession and being reported. And when violence comes to your door, uh, yeah, and when violence comes to your door, we're back in Germany. Are
Hmm.
you with us or are you against us? I mean, there's really only one option.
Hmm. So let's move this
I'm so much
toward
fun. I know.
ending on a more. I mean, there are still things to be hopeful about. Um, I keep encouraging people, and you do too, to focus on your individual communities, to get to know your neighbors, to get to know what resources and nonprofits and things like that exist in your community, to get out from behind a screen and get to know people, because that is the way you're going to build support structures for each other.
Yeah.
That's what Minnesotans have been doing. And, you know, they had to build a lot of that or build on top of George Floyd a lot of that to be as successful as they have been in resisting ICE and the Border Patrol. You can learn from that now in your own communities and use your individual visible groups and other kinds of groups to figure out how you would do those things. I've also been seeing really good Substack articles on ways to, you know, carrying traffic cones in your car so that you can, and I can't even believe that we have to have these kinds of things as Americans, but so you can put them on gas canisters and put them out and things like that. So there are people in Minneapolis, St. Paul, particularly, who have written these really great treatises on how to dismantle and disrupt a lot of what they've been doing there. And, you know, carrying leaf blowers and blowing it back on them and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
think that came out of Portland.
that, yeah, well, I mean, Portland has been, you know, to me, like the epic gods of resistance for ages. I mean, every time I went to Portland to speak about my books, they were protesting something.
Mhm.
So it is in their DNA that they
They're
protest all
seasoned.
the time. Yeah. So and it's one of my favorite places to go. It's my favorite city in the United States, actually. So I always love to go to that because there's always a certain area of downtown where they would be protesting. And I'm like, what are they mad about this time that I'm here? Let's go find out. So, you know, but those tools are really good to pay attention to from places like Portland and from what they've learned in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Now, from a nonprofit perspective, there's a reason why nonprofit funding is getting curved left and right because
Right.
those are usually the anchors of the community, from food banks all the way to those who have resources in case you find yourself without housing. Um, that would be an entire live on its own. I can speak at length to that. But what I'm noticing also is inevitably the more you get into the urban centers, the more challenging it becomes to organize. Not because people don't want to, but they literally lack the resources for organization.
Mm-hmm.
even though you think it would be easier because of the number of people there, actually, if you step outside of the true urbanization, the hot pocket, so to speak, that's actually where the organizations really happen because they have a little more elbow room to truly organize.
Mhm.
That's what I've noticed, at least so far. But on the whole, I think it it requires coordination, organization, collectivism. And there's this word again that usually makes Americans, freeze and feel uncomfortable. But when we look at the opposition, they are working in collectivistic nature.
Right.
So even if we don't want to take a page out of their book for obvious reasons, that's the one page we probably should take because collectivism is the only antidote to this.
In terms of community
Yeah,
organization, in terms of
yeah,
messaging,
yeah,
all of it. So,
yeah. Um, the the concern that I have is again not only what we're experiencing in the headlines, the gross violation of human rights, the murders, the executions, and the absolute immunity that is being given.
mhm.
But adjacently, it's the economic conditions that most Americans are fighting, where things are getting really dicey. And if you combine these two elements, then that's where I'm truly concerned that we don't have enough resources built up, and we're not quick enough to build them so to adequately and effectively support one another.
I mean, one of the things that's most impressed me in reading about Minneapolis St. Paul
Mhm.
is how quickly they organized by neighborhood, used businesses. They didn't necessarily go through nonprofits to
Yeah,
identify who can't go to work
yeah,
because of these people. How do we pay their bills? How do we pool our money? How do we make sure everybody has food this week? How do we make sure people's bills are getting paid this week?
yeah,
They did collective organizing at a really micro level very
yes,
quickly. And
and
so
very effectively.
yeah, and so they've
Yeah,
proven that it can be done. And so wherever you are listening to this, they've built the tools already.
yes,
If you know people who live in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or have access to indivisible groups there or whatever, reach out and see, what resources have they put together. I'm sure they've put together a lot of things for other people that you could use to be a leader in your own communities because we have to be our own heroes. Nobody's coming to save us.
no, no one will. And I think also I did talk with a friend of mine. She is in California. They also have pocketed groups that communicate via, I think, Signal or Telegram, one of those reasonably perceived to be secure applications. And they have pocket organizations within a zip code or within a certain perimeter around their own address. And they want one another. Similar circumstances when someone cannot go to work because of obvious fears, they support that family. So there's some really cool stuff going on a micro level.
Hmm.
I'm hoping it's gonna blow up to a macro level because then we have true big numbers of opposition.
Hmm.
And while I'm seeing the chat run, if I may just take a sidebar just for a second, there are two for everyone who's listening here, Jillian and Ginge, brilliant writers. If you want to get perspective and also personal experiences, those two I can highly recommend that you read some of their pieces. And if you haven't written, you subscribe, of course.
Now, I name checked and shared one of Ginger's pieces last week. I believe it was, wasn't it? Or the week before. So, her writing is wonderful. And Jillian has taken a little break, I think she said. But,
Yes.
but, I haven't seen as much come across from her, but I've shared some things that Ginger's
Yeah.
written. They're
Just
both wonderful.
brilliant, brilliant writers.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. So where shall we land this plane? Do you have a good runway in mind?
I like doing these and talking with you because you give a more international perspective to this, um, and a different perspective than I do. But a lot of our opinions merge, even though we come from entirely different backgrounds and worlds. So it's good to show that we can build a collective community, even though people come from different places and have different experiences.
It's again, every time you go into a description, something else bubbles up in my head. 2017, I was sitting with a group of the typical blue collar workers, electricians and plumbers and whatnot. Some of them company owners, and back then already the conversation was, well, illegal immigrants and essentially the how the Americans are being wronged by people who seek asylum or who immigrate illegally or not the conventional way. The interesting thing is back then in 2017, we still were able to have a conversation.
Mhm.
We disagreed, but we had a conversation. We agreed to disagree. We still had a good conversation and we left at least on respectful terms. Nowadays, I do not believe that I could have this conversation with someone who is on the exact opposite side of the spectrum. That to me is again, it's just sad.
There are people who talk about how they do that. And, there are people who write whole substacks about it and always leads. I mean, there's a couple who go out and try to find people on the other side and get into conversations with them. And Lord love them. I can't do it, but I'm glad people are doing that. There are more of us than I think we probably think there are who are able to do that kind of work. And they all say it's about listening and being curious and asking questions. And, my personal position is those people took enough of my life and other people can do that work. But I'm grateful for the people who
Yes,
do it.
and I mean, kudos to them.
Yeah.
And again, the by all measure, I am an immigrant.
Right.
I immigrated to the United States, or emigrated since I'm back in Europe now. But I spent 26 years there as a foreigner. Now, I have the necessary skin complexion to pass easily. Of course, I'm 6'2". No one really gets stupid in my presence. I am incredibly lucky. But what most people forget, again, in this entire immigration discussion is I had a choice.
Right.
I wasn't forced. I didn't grow up in a country that was essentially destroyed because the United States wanted something, whether
Mhm.
that's resources or regime change.
Mhm.
I had the incredible privilege to grow up very fortunate in that sense. So I had choices. The majority of those who are illegal immigrants or asylum seekers don't have a choice other than the obvious choice to say, I'm going to live my life in misery and at a level of dignity that is inhumane.
Mhm.
Now, I want to pose that question to anyone who's opposed to immigrants, whether illegal or asylum seekers. If you had the same type of conditions, wouldn't you want to get out too? And if the conditions were to improve from where you came, wouldn't you want to return? And there are numerous studies out there that if, for instance, an Afghan immigrant were to be presented with an opportunity to go back home to safety, economic opportunity, and a family life that resembles very much the same ideologies that we have, just happy, peaceful, and good,
Mhm.
yeah, they'd go back.
Mhm.
And it's again, it's this nuanced perspective that people are just mostly incapable of grasping. And even when they see it, then it's like, well, wait a minute. Can't be that bad.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, sure. You tried to be in Afghanistan.
Or Honduras, there's so many places. And Honduras is destroyed specifically because of the US.
Yep.
And people flee. And Venezuela the same. So
And I just wanna level set here real quick because I know that I'm coming across incredibly negative. I'm a hardcore realist, and I have spent 26 years in the US because I deeply loved it. And to this day, even though I'm not in the US now, I identify more as an American than as a European.
Hmm.
And that will likely remain like that for the rest of my life
Hmm.
because I have met incredible people and had phenomenal opportunities. So I'm not coming down collectively, generalizably on the United States, but on what I perceive to be in present day to be the enemy.
Hmm. That has been my experience as well with the majority of my friends who aren't American, see Americans as amazing people. And a lot of my friends really believe in us. So take hope in that. I mean, they can mourn what happened in 2024 and what's happening now and say, why would they ever choose this? But a lot of my friends really think Americans are awesome and strong and able to overcome this. So people are cheering for us
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
succeed and even again, as I said earlier, asking me how can I help? How can I do what I can do to, so there are people around the world who are doing that and who are fighting for us. When I say nobody's coming to save us, there's a lot that people are doing that could save us that
On an
aren't
individual
our,
level, yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
that aren't our leadership or whatever.
Yeah,
So take comfort in that. I've
yeah.
kept us everybody on here for 45 minutes and there's been a lot of chat. My husband is making dinner and it smells really good. So
But you know what the most amazing thing about those 42 minutes, 45 minutes was?
what?
We didn't veer off course.
We didn't. We
We
did.
did not. We stayed on topic for once.
We usually do. I mean, we usually do just talk all over the place. So this was good.
Yeah, so, we're gonna have to do this again because now my foundation is rattled. We can't do that.
And if we do it 2 times in a row, what will that mean? All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. If you don't subscribe to The Pulse, please subscribe to Michael's Substack. I read it every time he publishes. He does amazing deep dives into things and really gives you the nuance of what's happening on any particular topic he writes on. So please do subscribe and support his work.
Next
And
one's almost ready.
good, I'll look for it. And
You're not gonna like it. It's about Medicare Advantage and the things that people missed, and it's gonna be 35 million Americans that are gonna be in dire healthcare straits because of it.
yeah, no, it's on every front.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, go out and have a good rest of your day. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for taking the time.
And I'll see everyone again really soon.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Andra. Bye, everyone.